going to take this entire mixture and we're going to dump it directly into our bowl of sugar water yeast, and then I'm going to start whisking it. So this whole, your next 3 ingredients, again, 3 eggs, a 1/4 cup of olive oil, and a 1/2 tablespoon of, salt. We're going to dump that right in, and then I'm going to start whisking it so that we can evenly mix everything together. We want to break up the egg yolks just so that we have that all mixed together.
So
we have one question. Somebody used all 4 eggs.
Awesome, no problem, and I'll tell you why.
Okay, great, thank you.
Is that the question?
Yep.
So eggs are just gonna add fat and richness. So it's just, this is an egg dough. So if you used 4, excellent. If you used 5, no problem. It just makes it super rich and super eggy. So, you know, it's similar to like an egg pasta, right? Like you can use 1 or you could use 5 egg yolks. It's just gonna add a level of richness and fat, and it's wonderful. So no problem.
One other, Val, just, and Taryn, before we continue, so I realized somebody pointed out, and thank you, Pam, that I had not hit record when we started. So if we just want to, can we just again tell everyone what we put in the bowl first, for those who might be watching this after, and then we'll pick up with the 4 eggs and the olive oil and the kosher salt. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Okay. So the wonderful thing about the way that recipes work is typically your ingredients are listed in order of which we're going to use them. So your first 3 ingredients on the list are going to be the first 3 ingredients that we're going to be putting in this bowl. And those are the 3/4 tablespoon of yeast, the 3/4 cup of lukewarm water, and our 1/2 cup of sugar. So those are the 3 ingredients that we put in our bowl originally, and we whisk them together. It is an instant yeast, so it's automatically going to be activated for us. But you mix those first 3 ingredients together. The yeast and the sugar kind of work as the yeast is eating the sugar and everything is mixing together. You'll see a little bit of bubbles. You'll be able to smell sort of a bready aroma, which is just the yeast activating. But the first 3 ingredients on your recipe are going to be the first 3 that go into this bowl. Then we moved on to the next 3, which were the 1/4 cup of olive oil, the 1/2 tablespoon of salt, and 3 eggs. So what I did was cracked the 3 eggs in a separate bowl just in case we had any shells. I tend to find lots of shells in my dough, so I always crack those first. Then we put in a 1/4 cup of olive oil and a 1/2 tablespoon of salt. And then we added that into our bigger bowl with the yeast mixture, which was sugar, yeast, and water. So we whisked it all together, and now we have this lovely little mixture. And then we are going to start incorporating our flour. So let's just go over the ingredients that you have left over to the side. You should have 1 egg. Again, if you added your 4th egg, it's no problem at all. But we should have 1 egg left. We have a little container labeled sugar and salt for our egg wash, which we will get to. And then you have a quart container, which is 4 cups of flour, and a pint container filled with another additional cup of flour on the side, which we're going to start incorporating right now. So we're going to start moving on. We are going to start with our quart container of flour. We are going to start adding this in and mixing it just a little bit at a time. Again, if you put in a little too much, it's okay. All we're doing is mixing it together. As Val mentioned in the beginning, this is a super forgiving recipe, which is amazing, especially if it's your first time baking any type of bread. It's super versatile. You can really do whatever. You can add a little bit, then more, etc. You're good to go.
Okay, so I'm gonna answer a couple of quick questions while Taryn is gonna start incorporating the flour. And then we'll do some visual cues. So somebody asked if the salt is necessary if it wasn't added. No, if you don't put the salt in, that's okay. There is salt on the glaze, so that will be fine. But again, if it didn't get in there, that's okay, no problem. You know, you could probably knead it into the dough when you're kneading it, depending what kind of salt you have. But honestly, I think it's really not a problem. So absolutely, you can make it in a KitchenAid. So what you're going to do is you can do all of it actually in the KitchenAid, and then, you know, whisk it all together, and then you're going to just put the dough hook and let it knead, and we'll cue you again what it looks like. But yeah, you can. For us, we just used a traditional AP flour. We did not use we didn't use bread flour. Okay, so Taryn is going to show you for a second. So the first stage is almost a thick pancake batter. So we do that because we want to hydrate the flour and really get it all incorporated before we put the rest of the flour in to start kneading it all together. So it's a little thick. It looks like a, muffin dough, pretty much. Muffin dough, yeah.
Yep.
So it's nice and thick. And now we're going to continue to add the flour.
And just so you know where I'm at, I've used probably a little bit over half of the quart container of flour. So again, if you're not there yet, you've used a little bit more, you've used a little bit less, no problem at all.
So while she's adding it and she's incorporating it, there's a couple of things to think about. So flour, the amount of the flour is really going to depend. That's really not like to choice necessarily. It's really going to depend on the weather and what's happening in your house, right? Like you might have a house that's very warm. It might be a super humid day. So, with all recipes, again, especially with this recipe, you need to just be able to eyeball it to know, like, do I add more flour? Do I not add more flour? You'll eyeball it, you'll look at it, and you'll feel it, and that is what will tell you when you need more flour. So right now, Taryn has added probably 3 cups of flour, and it's at the stage that we call a shaggy dough. So it's not cohesive. Can you see that? It's not cohesive. It's a little sticky, and it has a lot of ways to go, but this is where we like to turn it out and start to knead it.
Yep. So I'm gonna swap out with Val, and she's gonna start the process of adding the rest of the flour, but kneading it out.
So while we're doing this, we're gonna talk a little bit about our ingredients and the ingredient choices that we use. So a challah is flour, egg, so egg fat binder, an actual fat, and a liquid, and then salt, and then a sweetener. So through our process, we like sugar. We've just found, that that's what we like personally. Honey would be delicious. You could go crazy and use maple syrup. You could use brown sugar. So just some sort of sweetener is going to give you the sort of sweet, eggy flavor that people love from challah. Fat. We use olive oil. We like the subtle flavor, but if you want something a little more neutral, you could absolutely use canola. We have not tried a butter one, but I bet you that would be killer. So again, it's really just sort of the choice of what fat you would like to use. You could also probably use like a hazelnut oil or walnut oil, just again for a very subtle layer of flavor, and that would be delicious.
Yep. Val, can you talk about if we were to use a bread flour, what difference that would make?
None. I think it's the same. Yeah, you're gonna have a higher protein, but I think it's the same amount.
So, and the next question we have is, my dough was really sticky. How do you keep it from not sticking once you've turned it out? It's supposed to be very sticky. But that's why we have extra flour that's left over, is because as we're kneading, we're going to continue to incorporate more flour.
So right now the dough is like super tender, it's starting to come together, but it's getting less sticky. But the more you like press it, it's gonna get sticky. So we need to do a lot of kneading it, and this is gonna be working in more dough. And then you're working the flour to develop the gluten, which is gonna give us like those really, really nice crumb in the inside of the dough. So that's why we-
Mary Solander asked about the honey, and this is a family who makes honey, or not harvests honey. I actually use honey in my regular recipe, and I add about 1/3 of a cup. I mean, it varies. You can add as much sugar or honey to taste. So it's really about what you like. And if you play with it and you find one that, and actually, I'm going to talk, I think, a little bit about, not right now, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the ingredients traditionally, and that's part of it is honey and the sweetness and the traditions around the world for challah.
That's a perfect lead in. So I'll finish 2 things, and then I think we'll kick it over to you for a little bit, Rabbi. So the last thing, so we use an olive oil. We talked about that. Eggs, we find that we like 3, but again, 4 would be great. You could use another 2, 1, 2 extra egg yolks just to get a little bit richer. So again, once you make the base dough the first time, then that's when you can say like, oh, hey, I'd like it a little bit sweeter, or like, oh, I would like it a little bit richer, or I didn't need the salt, or I wanted more salt, or I want to try a different type of salt. So you can really play around with that. The last piece is that there's water. When we started it, we used our chicken broth, which was the most delicious, but we couldn't do it because we wanted to be a vegetarian dough. And so we stopped that. But as a pro tip, if you put a little bit of chicken stock, well, and actually for your fat, you could use chicken fat for schmaltz. That would be amazing. But if you want to put a little bit of chicken stock in for your liquid, it's an easy sub 1-to-1 for your water. So, all right. So I'm going to continue to knead. I will, don't mute me, Rabbi, if that's okay.
I'm not going to mute you. I'm just unmuting myself.
Perfect.
We're going to go back to kneading later.
Perfect. Yeah, so this is kneading, and I'll continue to show as we go. So now Rabbi is going to tell us a little bit about some of the history and.
Yeah. So interesting that we just there was mention of the chicken schmaltz, because that was traditionally one of the things that, well, not traditionally, but at one point that's part of what was used, and then it was decided at another point in time, and some of you may know or have even grown up with chicken schmaltz challah. It's not parve. You know, you can only use that for most people would traditionally have a Shabbat meal that was meat anyway. But also it was decided that that was really not healthy to have that much schmaltz in the challah every week. So what's interesting is the origin, the idea of challah comes, we think, originally from the Torah, but it is actually, it's mentioned several times in the Torah, in the book of Exodus, in chapter 29, verse 2, where there's mention of unleavened cakes that would be made from fine wheat flour. And then there's another mention also in the book of Deuteronomy, and the word challah or chalot is used there, and in not Deuteronomy, excuse me, Numbers, Bamidbar, that you should set aside cake, challah, as an offering, and that would be set aside, and that's where the tradition comes from of if you make a lot of challah, I think it's if you use 5 pounds of flour, is the tradition of tearing lahafrish et ha-challah, to separate the challah, and some of you know that tradition of pulling out some of the challah before you braid it, and then disposing of that bit, or some people burn it. So
we're gonna have to start doing that.
Yeah,
we make pounds and pounds. I'm just gonna show for a second, so you can see it's a denser dough now. It's come together more. It's still a little sticky, so when I pull, my fingers still stick. So I'm going to continue to add more flour. When it gets too much flour is when it starts to crack. Too little flour is when you still stick. So continue. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. This is important. Everyone can. I can give you sources on where you can find some of this information, but to be able to have you guys right here is great. So one of the things that's really interesting is that the original challah was not the challah we know today, that for centuries it was actually more of a flatbread. And that was, and it varied a little bit culturally from place to place, but it was until about the 15th century, that's essentially what it was. And then in the 1400s, the late 1400s, people started using white flour for a few reasons. White flour was special, and they wanted to make the challah, the bread that they were making on Shabbat, a little bit more special than the everyday. Also, there's a tradition that we know in the Torah. It talks about God giving us manna during that time in the desert when there wasn't food to eat, and a double portion on Shabbat. And one of the things that some of the rabbis say, actually this is a later Rabbi Malbin said, is that it was actually more like crystals during the week, but it was white on Shabbat, and that the white symbolized mercy and kindness. And because God was merciful and kind in giving us an extra portion for Shabbat, that's how that tradition came about, of using the white flour. And also, again, it was seen as something that was a little bit more special. And what's also interesting is some of the, as I mentioned before, the idea of what ingredients would be used. So, we know that the kuchen, I'm not, the Yiddish, I'm not sure on the pronunciation. I should actually ask my mom. But there was a tradition of adding sweetness to the challah. That came about in Ashkenazic countries, Ashkenazic places. But the Sephardic didn't want to use the sweetness because then they felt like it was not still the challah, and they couldn't say hamotzi over it because it then was more like a pastry or a dessert rather than a challah. And it's interesting because when you go to different places, and you taste challah in different places, how it's made, it is a little different. Israeli challah tastes different than American challah. And of course, we have a range here as well. And certainly we're going to talk about variations on it. But either way, it's this idea of making the bread special for Shabbat. And then also sometime during the 1400s, they started braiding the bread. It wasn't braided before. It was, as I said, it was more of a flatbread. I mean, I imagine it was even similar to what we might just call pita. That was a traditional bread at least in the Middle East. But later on, that was an easy bread to make. But it could be like a black bread or some other type of bread. But for Shabbat, they started braiding it in Germany because they found that braiding it actually helped it stay fresh longer. And it was that was important as well. And so that type of challah is the kind that made it over here, because when you think about it, Germany, German Jews were some of the early wave of immigration to the United States, brought that tradition, which had a special name as well. But I can share the Yiddish with you in the chat, and I'm going to turn it back to Val.
I love that. Will you share that with us too? I think that's so.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So here is where we are with the fully kneaded dough. So the cue that we give, and so again, let's think about the path, right? It was shaggy, and then it was super sticky and loose, and then as we kneaded it, it firmed up and it got less sticky. So when you poke it, it comes right back. But we always say that it's as smooth as a clean baby's bum. So if you look at it, like, it's really nice and smooth. Smells delicious, smells like bread, and we're ready to go. So we are going to put this in a bowl where it is going to rise. And then by the magic of television, we have some dough that has risen, and we're going to set up for our next portion, which is braiding together. So we encourage all of you to get your dough ready, get back to your kitchen, get whatever you need, and let's keep going.
And then to answer a couple of these questions, so how will shaping the challah round instead of a regular braid impact baking time? It doesn't, unless we have a lot like the minis. We might bake it for a little bit less time, but for the most part, and you'll see a couple that we did earlier, just so you can see again, magic of TV. But we kept it in for the same amount of time, whether it was a loaf or whether it was the rounds, you should be okay. If it looks, it should be a nice golden brown on top as well as the bottom. If it looks like it needs to bake a little bit longer, then you can keep it in for a little bit longer. And then the pre-made doughs that you got, we actually, we let it rise once and we punched it down. And so your second rise is going to happen after we braid it. So you're ready to start braiding with us, and then we'll all let it rise before it bakes.
When you put your dough, you put the dough in an oiled container so it doesn't stick to the mouth. So not a big deal.
So there's my answer.
Yeah, so for people who did do the pre-made dough, I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier. If you want to just have a little bit of flour next to you, it's just going to be a little sticky, so just a little more flour is going to help the stickiness. All right.
Do you need anything?
Do you want to wait till a little bit later to do about the round versus the?
Do you want to talk about that?
I can now, yeah.
And also, just right before you jump in, if we haven't preheated our ovens to 350, go ahead and preheat your oven to 350.
Actually, Rabbi, let's hold on that until we start to do the round.
And with that, that's totally fine.
So your pre-made dough, or the whole recipe, is going to give you, it's a lot. It's about 800 grams of flour. So pretty much what we're going to do is we're going to cut it in half. And then we're going to, put half of it to the side. And then we're going to work with this one. So the first one we're going to do is we are going to do a traditional 3-braid strand of challah. So I'm going to cut this into 3 equal sizes. You can be super specific, and you could weigh it if you wanted to, but honestly, we just eyeball it. So like my cutting didn't seem to be that even. So I just sort of ripped off a piece, and I'm just going to smush it here and then make it into a ball, or rough ball. That's fine. 3 pieces.
So we are braiding challah with a traditional 3-strand.
Yes. 3 strands. So I've got 3 little balls. So now we're gonna make ropes. So pretty much you're just gonna flatten it in your hand a little bit, and then you're just gonna roll. So again, this is, I can only say this, well, I'm happy to say it over and over again. It's such a versatile dough. And so, and inherently dough and bread likes to be worked. So if you, work it and yeah, the rising is really what is the resting period. And that's when the gluten is able to relax. But the dough likes to be worked, and then we're gonna let it rise, and that gives it its rest. So I'm making, I guess that's probably a foot. Somewhat even if you can. So there you go. It's elastic, so it's gonna shrink in, and then we can just stretch it back out.
It won't stretch as much.
So the colder it is.
No, just as you.
Oh, yeah. So the more you work it, it won't stretch back as much. So it's cold, so it's contracting. So we're gonna do these 3.
Mine separated into 4. Can I do 4?
Yeah, you can do a 4 braid, absolutely.
Okay.
You might have to show us. We're traditional 3 braiders, but we'll be happy to see what that looks like.
I
Use the other half for the
I don't know what the heck I'm doing.
Hey, I think it's great.
There are YouTubes if you want to learn how to do a 4. It's you have to. Some of them are upside down, so you just have to figure that out. But you can do it that way too. I still the three braid seems to be and actually that was the easiest, the simplest, the original, and then fancier. I think one of the things that came about was the 6 braid. Because if you made 2 challahs and they were 6 braids each, then it was equivalent to 12, which was the 12 tribes. That represented the bread that was offered in the temple.
All right, so we've got 3 ropes of dough. I'm stretching them a little bit. So the way that we do this is we unite the 3 at the top. You don't have to smush them together, just sort of put them all together. Then it's like making a friendship bracelet. You're gonna take the right over the middle, and then pretty much the technique is always everything goes over whatever is the middle strand. So over, you're creating new middle strands because you continue to move, over, and you want it to be a nice tight and fat braid. Over, and then at the bottom, you just sort of smush and tuck. And then I like to go back to the top to try to just do it backwards. So then just the top, you just wanna braid that so it's even too. And then you smush, tuck, and then you've got a nice challah.
Going really fast.
We'll do it again.
Well, it takes time to just do this.
So I'm gonna cut this guy.
I don't know. It's sticking to everything.
If it's sticking, if you have a little bit of flour, just use a little bit of flour to help.
Yeah.
Is this when you put the raisins in? Is this when you put the raisins in?
Yeah, so I think so. What I would do with the raisins is I think I would, get it into the dough, and then I would, sort of smush it in, put it here, and then just sort of fold it in, and then braid it in. I think that that's going to be the best way to do that. So just going nice. Nice, Mom. That was good.
Beautiful. We're gonna
show you what's happening over
pan in.
here in our kitchen.
gorgeous.
Very good, Mom.
We're gonna have so much challah.
So much challah, yes. This is going to be a family that is overrun in challah. It's a good way to start the new year, I think.
Sweet New Year.
Sweet New Year. Yes, exactly. Okay. Any questions? Anybody have?
So we have, should we grease the pan? You can, I mean, if you have parchment paper, that's great, and you don't need to. If you would like to, it just helps to non-stick. It won't be a problem if you do. If the pre-made dough isn't smooth enough, what do you do after kneading? You could just knead in a little bit more flour and it'll smooth out.
If it's getting cracky, it means that maybe there's too much flour. So you could put, a sprinkle of water just to get it back into the smooth dough texture. But, again, I think there's moisture in the dough, so just keep kneading it.
And it shouldn't get too tough from reworking it. I mean, it's at a stage right now where the gluten has already developed, and, we're just sort of, playing with it and whatnot. It won't get too tough.
You'll let it rest.
Yeah.
So, you'll definitely give it time to rest. You know, different recipes are going to call for different different rise times and rest times. We do a three rise recipe. Again, it's just, you know, rising not only lets the dough relax and gluten relax, which is what gives you a tender bread, but it also develops the flavor. So the more it rises, the yeast is eating the sugar and it's developing the flavor of the challah as well. So the longer it rises, the more flavor you develop as well.
And then as far as how many inches are the braids, so ours are approximately 10 to 12, but it really varies. So if you wanted to do one that's a little bit smaller, you wanted to do one that was like a little bit thinner, it's really up to you. With about a half a dough and each strand being about 10 to 12 inches, that's what we're currently working with. And then if we were adding Nutella, when to add the Nutella into the bread,
We'll show you that when we do a stuffed, so we'll come back to that. So I'm going to show the braided one more time before moving on to the next one. So look, I want to say something. These are kind of ugly, right? Like they're not perfectly smooth. They're a little misshapen. No problem, right? It's going to all come together. You don't have to be worried about it. It's going to bake up really beautifully. So, you know, again, when you can add, if you can, I like to, you know, if this side's a little skinny, I like to flip it so it's, you know, it's not like a super fat braid and then a super skinny braid. But again, there's no worry in this. It's a very versatile dough. So from the side, again, same thing, uniting the top, and then you can spread them out. You've got your middle guy, right? So you're going to always cross over the middle, always cross over the middle, always cross over the middle. And the top came a little undone, so we'll come back to that. Always cross over the middle, always cross middle, cross, 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 cross. So again, once you get into the rhythm of it, and then at the bottom, pinch and tuck, and then just back up here, 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 and pinch and tuck and challah.
and we have a braiding video that we're more than happy to send to everybody, that, you know, you'll have for future challah baking and braiding.
Okay, so we've got 15 minutes, so I'm going to move on to the next one, which is a round. So I'm going to talk it through, and then while we're all practicing, Rabbi will tell us a little bit about the religious, you know, connections to a round dough. So there's two ways to do a round dough. So the first, actually, is an easy way, and I wouldn't even say cheater, right? It's just another way to do a round dough. So you can take your braid, and then you just twist it. And then again, there's a lot of like pinching and tucking, but beautiful, nice, very easy round challah. But then there is a traditional, well, I don't know if it's traditional, there's another way to braid that, so I will show you that. Okay, so I'm gonna make 4 strands, equal strands. Do 2 strands for me, thank you. Thank you. So we're just gonna do 4 equal strands, and what we're gonna do, and again, it's gonna be different sizes. We just used a portion of the dough that we made. So it's not going to be, you know, it's not as easy to say like, oh, make it a foot. It's really how much you have and what you would like, but you do want to have room to work. So we're going, you know, as long as we can, 4 strands. And then what we're going to do is we're going to make a number sign. So you're going to do 2 strands horizontal, and then you're going to weave. So you're making a number sign, but you're weaving. So the top strand goes on top of the first and under the bottom. And then the other strand is the opposite. So under and there. So it's almost like a lattice of a pie crust, if this is a pie making crew. So it looks like a number sign, if you can see that. But I have removed the space in the middle. Yeah, so to explain it again, 4 strands, 2 horizontal, 2 vertical, and you're going to weave the vertical under the horizontal. So the one on the left is going to go on the top of the top horizontal and then under the bottom one. And this one is going to go under this guy and then over this guy. Yeah. So it's the opposite. So it's a weaved number sign pretty much. So then what you're going to do is pretty much everything under goes over. So every under strand goes over the next one and you go to the right. So we're taking this guy that's under and we're crossing it over. Then we're taking this guy that's under, we're crossing it over. We're taking this guy that's under, crossing it over. This one that's under, crossing it over. then you do the opposite. This one is under, you cross over. This one is under, you cross over. Under, over, under, over, and then you do the opposite one more time around. And again, you're just weaving it and braiding it together. Under, it comes over.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's neat and it's easy. Under, over, I mean, somewhat easy. I had to practice a few times. Under, over, and then, you know, again, you could do one more, but honestly, you can just pinch and tuck, and then you've got a nice round challah that is all together. It looks a little bit like a turtle. It's very cute. There you go. Rabbi, do you want to tell a little bit about the round challah?
Sure.
Can you show it again while Rabbi Shaikman is doing this? Can you show us that under over again?
Absolutely.
We have.
Oh, great. Yeah. You got it.
Okay.
Two chefs have prepared us.
So as they're getting that ready, you know, there's the tradition for the high holidays is often to have A, round, B, raisins, which I know was mentioned. And also, by the way, if you don't already add honey to your regular challah, that would be a tradition as well. You could do that special for Rosh Hashanah. I'm going to pause for a moment so that, and then I'll come back to it so that Val can show you again, so that those of you who need the extra, I need the extra too. I don't mean it like that, but I want to see it one more time without distraction of my voice.
So this is a little bit tighter, as you can see. And again, we like to go to the right, but everything that is under goes over. So you can see this one is under, and you're just gonna put it right there. This one is under, goes right there. This one is under, goes right there. This one is under, goes right there. And now this one, which we started with, we're gonna go the opposite way. So now this one is under, it goes over. This one is under, it goes over. This one is under, it goes over. This one under, over. And then we're gonna do one more time, but this one looks kind of short, so no problem, I just pull it. This one goes over, this one goes over, this one, stretch, stretch, over, this one, over. I know, it's not bad. And then this one, I'm just gonna go here and then pinch them together. And again, sometimes it comes undone. No problem, just pinch it again. Like this, I'm not trying to make light of it, but I want you to have confidence that, you know, it's such a versatile dough that it's really hard to hurt it. So if it comes undone, pinch it together again. Put a slight dab of water, whatever you need to do. It's gonna be delicious and you will have made it, and that's most amazing.
When do you add the honey? In the beginning instead of sugar?
Yeah.
You can add it instead of sugar or in addition to sugar.
Thank you.
Is there any chance you could do that one more time?
Yep, but I'm gonna do it while Rabbi is
Yeah, I'm
talking.
gonna speak
We
this
are- Our timing is getting tight. We're happy to go a little bit over. If anybody has to jump off right at 5, please, no worries. But we will continue to go, you know, if we want to, you know, to finish it up a little ways. So,
And then Sarah, to answer your question, we're gonna add the apples in our next portion. So, you know, hang tight.
yeah. So Rabbi's gonna talk. We're gonna do
Yep.
one more round, and then we're gonna demo the second.
How long do we preheat the oven?
Till it's heated. So just heat till 350, and then once it comes to temperature, then that's fine.
Okay.
So as far as a round challah, again, these, you know, some of these traditions developed over time, the same way that the idea of using white flour on Shabbat and doing a braided bread was basically to make it special and different than every other day. Same thing for the round challah, and that idea of the roundness. There are a few different reasons that are given. One is the idea that the round challah is symbolic of God's crown of God, and so is a way to honor God at the beginning of the year, and it also represents a year filled with never-ending good. You know, we have lots of these ideas of the roundness, of the round foods that we might eat at Rosh Hashanah, and the idea of the cycle of the year that continues, but this idea of a never-ending good, which is wonderful as we begin a new year, to think that never-ending good will happen. We certainly need it this year, that or as I like to think, it's the not just the unending good, but the continuation of good, and that's part of it as well. There also, and some of you may have seen, I have friends who do all kinds of variations on challah for different holidays. I have friends who will make their chalot into lulav and etrog shape, or do other special shapes for different Jewish holidays. So there's also a custom for Rosh Hashanah of creating a ladder across the top, and that ladder represents the idea of who will ascend in or descend in health and wealth in the coming year. So that's one idea. Thank you, Taryn.
We'll do one next year. We'll do the ladder next year.
Okay. There's another one. This is one I loved, is that I came across, but I hadn't seen, is the idea of baking a challah in the shape of a bird, based on a verse in Isaiah chapter 31, verse 5. As hovering birds, so will the eternal protect Jerusalem. So the idea of the bird as protection, and really you can, if you are a baker and if you're someone who wants to try different shapes, I can direct you to Facebook groups on challah. I'm in a few, and I'm happy to do that for those of you who are interested. But I'm gonna turn it back to Val and Taryn, because I know we want to learn about the stuffed apple challah. Apple and honey.
Thank you. And I want to see those. I mean, I can't. That would be a fun one to do. So, I want to say thanks to Randy and to Linda and to Judy and to Val Letterberg, because, we've been talking about this class for the last few months and having a really fun amount of brainstorm, and my mom also. And, during one of our conversations, I think I said the apple and honey stuffed challah. And my mom said, do you know how to make that? And I was like, no, but I'll figure it out. So we did, and I'm so glad we did, because it is so good. And I tried a couple of different ways, and I'll talk to you about the way that we landed on it. But this is really just indicative of any stuffed challah. And so I'm going to show you the process. We will, I think we are videoing it, and we're happy to do a special video and send it. I won't be able to re-roll this one, because it's gonna have all the stuff in it. So pretty much you take your 3 portions of dough, and then you're gonna roll it out into a nice wide, rectangle pretty much. So you wanna get it nice. I'm just gonna get a little bit of flour here. These are a little longer than I would like, so I'm just gonna tighten them here. So I didn't go as long because I want to have the room to roll it out. And then can roll it out nicely. So again, it's working it, it's just smushing it. And again, it's gonna pull back, but just keep going. But as much of a rectangle, or close to a rectangle as you can do, the better. So you can see that. So what can you stuff a challah with? Anything. You can go sweet, you can go savory. Obviously, cinnamon sugar is a classic. You would just spread the cinnamon sugar. Chocolate, I think Evie probably can give us some tips here, but you could put chocolate chips in the middle. You could put Nutella. So somebody asked about Nutella, so spread the Nutella. Now, keep in mind, and I'll show this to you, you need to encapsulate it or encapture the whatever is the inside. So you want to, sort of work in an interior square, so you have enough room to fold over and close it inside. So, here is this. We're going to do apples and honey, but you could do Parmesan. I've done Parmesan. You could do herbs. You could do pesto. You could do pesto and mozzarella cheese. Really, the sky is the limit. Do you only do one? I'm going to start with one, and then I'll do one.
There's a question about rising in the chat. Can you let the dough, I think, rise too long?
Yeah, I mean, you can.
Yeah.
But I
think there's some different, there are different ways you can do it. I know I was just with my sister, and she was making gluten-free challah, but she does this with regular challah. I let my challah do its first rise for a few hours usually, and then I have a shorter rise after I braid it. Some people just do one. I think there are a few different ways that you can do the rise.
We're 3, so we do make the dough, rise, punch it down, rise, braid, and then, give it a half an hour and then bake. but that's not going to overproof it. So.
And you can also do a cold rise, which I've done, you know, if I don't always have time to make the challah on Thursday night. The only danger in that is make sure the bowl is big enough because I had a couple of times that it was dangerously close at the top to going over the sides.
But when you do that, you just want to make sure you have enough time. So that, you know, you need a good 12 hours to let it rise slowly. All right, so what you can see is I shingled very thinly sliced apples that I tossed with lots of cinnamon and lots of honey on a diagonal. So they're very thinly sliced, and I sort of shingled them down the center, but I'm leaving a nice amount of you know, stuff on the side. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna stretch and fold, stretch it, and again, if they come out a little bit, no problem, stretch, and then you're just gonna pinch it closed. Stretch it, pinch it closed. If a little bit comes out, no problem, it's just gonna, you know, be really, really delicious, but you know, to your best ability, you wanna stretch it and fold it, and then this is now your strand, and that's what you will use to braid. So we're gonna put that one there, then we're gonna do another one over here.
What if you don't want to do all of them?
You don't, my mom just asked, what if you don't want to do all of them? You don't have to. You could just stuff one or two. You could stuff it with different things. Sarah's pear and honey is going to be delicious. You could do an apple and a chocolate chip one. That could be really nice.
Some of you saw Rabbi Fischel for 4th of July did one strand with cranberries, one with white, I think it was white chocolate chips, and then one with blueberries, I believe.
Yeah.
Dried is probably better to do just, you know, in that case, but yeah.
Do any sort of jam, you know, jam, like a nice jam would be delicious. I have a little bit more flour on here, so it's getting a little.
When do you let it rise the first time? After you make the mixture?
Yeah. Turn that a little bit.
And then the second time is after you do the braiding and then you let it rise again?
Nope. So for us, we make the dough after you've kneaded it. You put it in an oiled bowl. You let it rise for about an hour. Ideally, it is puffed a little bit. You punch it down, and then you let it rise again. So another hour, and give it another, you know, opportunity for levity, and then you braid from there. So we do 2 rises. It's not required. That's just how we like to do it. But you can absolutely just do 1 rise, or you can rise longer when you are after you've braided it. So
after you do the design, then you just bake it.
You let it rise for a little bit longer, so like a half an hour, just to
So
give
that's
it
3 rises.
Yep, we do a 3 rise. Yep, that's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so we've done this one. So I'm just going to do 2, so I can show you how to braid it all together. Sorry, 2 that are stuffed, 1 that is not stuffed. Okay, and then here we go. So then the braiding is the same as you would braid other. So unite the top, and then over a little bit more gently. Obviously, you don't want to puncture it, but again, if it oozes out a little bit, that's okay. This one is oozing. Press it, press it, press it.
Do you have any, I'm sorry to interrupt, any tips if the wetness of the apples are keeping it from sealing up the braid?
You know, I think for us, I didn't put a ton of the wetness. I just used the apples and then dribbled the wetness on top. But you know, I would just try to get it to stick. You know, it should make it stick together.
Okay.
If it's too much, maybe blot it, but I think it should be, hopefully it should be okay. Again, the wetness is just going to be sugar. So when it bakes, it's just going to be delicious, you know, caramel. So it's going to be amazing, I think. Just watch it in the oven so it doesn't burn. But other than that, you should be good to go.
You did the same thing with chocolate that you did with the apples.
Exact same thing. Rectangle, and then filling in the middle. And then so
the filling, whatever the filling you want.
Correct. Just leave your pain of, you know, ability to flip over. So you can see here it is all together, all braided. So we are going to put it on our pan. And then again, we have another magic of TV to show you the challahs that we made earlier, to show you what they look like after they have been baking. So we did 3 challahs. So this is just a traditional braided. Oh, and I want to tell you something very important. So this is a traditional braided, and here are 2 rounds. This is on the parchment, so it's nice and brown on the bottom, but it's not burnt. Here's a good question. How do you get it so shiny? we do a double egg wash. So what we didn't get to show you is we made an egg wash, actually, we could show you. So with the egg wash, you're gonna use your final egg, and you're gonna use that sugar salt mixture. You're going to then brush it all over the challah. So Sharon's gonna show that. So then what we do is after we brush it, after it's rised, and you can see, right, it's already puffy. So the challah has already continued to rise. We made a cute little guy over here. So we brush it, then we're gonna put it in a 350-degree oven. Then halfway through, so we cook these for about 40 minutes. Halfway through, we take it out, we re-egg wash it, and then we put it back in. And that is our secret to getting it super, super shiny. And the shininess that you find in a bakery is the double egg wash. So we highly recommend that. And actually, maybe we can rip this one apart and we can look at the, can I rip this one apart, Mom? Sure. Okay, so we can look at the strands. So once you take it out, it is important to let it cool. You want to give it the chance to let it cool and develop. It's hard when it smells so good. Your house will smell amazing. Even this smells so good. So you can see it here. And the other thing to know is when it's done, it sounds a little hollow when you tap on it. But once we've pulled this one apart, you can see you've got your nice strands of gluten. We call it a tender crumb. So it's a nice sort of tender challah, and it's probably delicious, but you should taste it. Let's see.
Yeah.
Mom? What do you think?
Amazing.
For us, again, the perfect amount of egg and fat. It's got a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of sugar. It's not too sugary. And it is
It's amazing.
delish.
Yep.
So good luck not eating the whole loaf, because I usually do.
Or 10 that we have.
Or 10. Questions, comments, anything else that So baking time. So I'll check the recipe. So you're gonna bake the first time for about 20 minutes, re-egg wash it, and then bake it again for a big one, another 15 to 20 minutes. But again,
What about if you make 4 little ones?
For
How
little
long-
me a little bit less time. So you're going to want to watch that. We suggest doing about 8-minute increments. So put it in the oven for about 8 minutes with your first egg wash. So as it's raw and it's risen, you'll egg wash it, put it in for about 8 minutes, take it out at 8 minutes, re-egg wash it, and probably do about another 8 to 10. But watch it, you want it to be golden, but make sure it's not overcooking.
even though it's a smaller piece, you are still putting 4 things in the oven. So, again, there's more things that are cooking. And so just keep watching. So
Another question, did we put in the oven yet? Yep. Also, best way to freeze.
Okay, so putting it in the oven. So it depends where you are and what recipe you follow. So if you were using the pre-made dough, yeah, absolutely. So braid it, egg wash it. Once it's egg washed and your oven is preheated, absolutely pop it in. Pending when you made your dough. Yeah, I think after you have braided it and given it a few minutes to sit, yep, it's time to bake it. But if you would prefer to freeze it, this is an excellent time to freeze it once it's braided. Don't egg wash it. Braid it, wrap it in saran wrap very carefully. You could even double. You could saran wrap it, and then you could put it in. You could put it in a plastic bag and then put it into the freezer and then bake it that way. Egg wash, yes. So the egg wash is just beaten egg. So in the recipe, it tells you how much sugar and salt. It's really just a pinch of sugar and salt. You can choose to do sugar. You can choose not to do sugar. It's really your choice. If you got the challah kit, it was pre-measured. And it's in that little container. You can just dump it in. Baking rack position. In general, you want to put the baking rack in the middle of the oven just for better air circulation. So that's totally fine. Freezing the baked challah. So after it is baked, let it fully cool. Once it's fully cool, same thing as the raw, wrap it in saran, double bag it into a Ziploc and pop it in the freezer. What level do you bake the challah at? In the middle rack, Mary. Do you use the whole portion for the stuffed type? So that whole portion of dough, that's gonna really give you 2 big challahs. So this was one portion of dough gave us, this challah that I've now broken into and 2 of these guys. So, it's really up to you. I would recommend cutting that into half and then, cutting each each section, each half into 3 sections. But again, you could do more if you liked. Gabrielle, 1 egg. No, don't egg wash it before freezing. Nope, egg wash it once you, once you defrost it. So again, if you have frozen the braided dough, as it is defrosting, that's going to really give you its final rise. So take it out, egg wash it, let it defrost. It'll wake up, it'll puff, and then it'll be ready to be delicious.
Thank you.
Can you, can you,
Sarah, we're gonna
drizzle
thank-
it? Can you drizzle it with honey after you bake it, or cinnamon and sugar?
So, okay, it's a great question. So yeah, you can do whatever you'd like. So you could do cinnamon sugar, you could make a honey butter. The only thing I would say is be careful about glazing it with honey in the beginning of the baking, because honey is sugar and it will burn. So, you can glaze it. I actually tested a version where I glazed it with egg wash and applesauce. And again, you're just gonna have more of a sugar content, so it could burn. So just be careful. But yeah, so I would just be careful if you glaze it. But listen, once it's cooked, you can absolutely drizzle it with honey, have it with some apples, eat the extra. We're gonna eat the extra.
And Bonnie asked what the sprinkles are for. I'm guessing you can put that on top if you wanted instead of poppy seeds or.
Yeah, totally. So we at Prescription Chicken this summer, obviously when everybody was stuck at home and nobody could get yeast, we said, hey, we should do a challah kit for people. So we do a challah kit, and we think sprinkles make everything fun. So we put sprinkles in, and if people wanted to top their challah with sprinkles, it just made things a little bit more fun. You don't have to, but we sent them for you as well.
And I'm sure, there are lots of variations on that in terms of what you want to put on top, but I will also recommend something I tried during this quarantine period was, the everything but the bagel spice. Like, it's so good on top of it. Do one of your challahs with that. It's delicious.
You can actually make challah. So I'm sure everybody knows from Izzy's Bagels, and they do a challah bagel. So same thing. You can do a challah bagel with what you did. So pretty much you take your dough, you portion it out, you roll it out into the long rope, you fashion a circle, and then like a traditional bagel, you just boil it for a minute before baking it. If you're going to do that, and I don't know if you found this, Rabbi, with the everything but the bagel, it does burn a little bit. So again, you just have to watch it. But yeah, it is such a good topping. So I
one other piece I just want to throw out there and share that's also a tradition is about how we come to the baking too. And I know that sometimes I wanted to just add this piece because I think especially as we get ready to enter into a new year, often we might feel rushed, and if you're trying to bake challah, or if there's too much going on, there's a tradition that talks about our intention as we make the challah, as we even begin the process, and something just to keep in mind. The tradition we're told in the book of Genesis and Braid that Sarah, Abraham's wife Sarah, Isaac's mother, that there was always a blessing in the dough. And the rabbis wondered what that blessing was, because surely they had the best ingredients already. Abraham actually was a very wealthy man for that time. They had the best ingredients. So it must have been, what was it that made her challah so sweet, so delicious, and just amazing? And they say that it was because of how she baked it, what her intention was when she came to it. So even at those times when we feel rushed, I also try to remember that every time I go to make the challah, to take that as a breath at the end, as we're preparing for the end of the week, here as we're preparing for the new year. And even as I make the dough, there's a tradition as we make the dough of reciting names for those who are in need of healing. So I think of people who I know in my life who are in need of healing. I also think of those who I want to think of because there's something good going on in their life, or they're having a hard time. It might not be health, it might be other things. But that also can make this a spiritual process as we make the dough. And so that whole idea of how we approach it can make our challah, they say if your challah is dense or is, something else is not quite right with it, that maybe, we can discuss this at another time, but maybe it's about our attitude as we're preparing it. But I think taking that time and approaching it as a moment for you, and a moment to take a breath and to think about the people in your life who you love and care about, and just sort of sharing and spreading that sense of warmth and kindness and generosity, which is who our ancestor Sarah was, and Abraham as well, in their hospitality. And then I encourage you, if you keep doing this, I know many of you already make challah or have done this before, but it's not just about the round challah, but this is such a great opportunity to just remember that we can share those blessings with others. So I hope that you'll do that. And I know we might not be quite over, but I wanted to thank Val and Taryn for sharing with all of us, and so warmly, patiently, generously, so that we can all start this new year from that place of just taking that deep breath and letting everything else go for the time that you're kneading the dough, mixing the dough, and then kneading the dough, and then smelling it. As my Evie says, she can't sleep on Thursday nights. They actually asked me to make it on Fridays instead because she can't sleep because of the smell of the challah.
It's I think a really special way to start a really funny year that we've had and new year that we're going into, and so to be able to do this together and share this, I think is a really nice set of memories. And so we're grateful and thankful, and we'd like to see pictures of your final product. So I think you have our email address, but if you have Instagram or you have Facebook, tag us, write to us, post us on there as well, email us. We'd love to see it all, and we hope you enjoy it and have a very happy, healthy new year.
Thank you, Val.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
Tova to everyone. A
And
good health year.
Tova, thank you.
Thank you.
so much.
We were very everyone.
enjoyable.
Thank you.
You're
wonderful teachers.
Excellent. Look forward to the video.
Oh yeah.
and thank you, Rabbi Shankman.
Thank you.
I'm just happy to be a part of it. My pleasure.
Thank you very much. It was wonderful.
Happy, healthy New Year to everyone.
Happy and healthy New
As
Year.
everyone's signing off, Val and Taryn, when is the latest that people could, and I'm asking this selfishly, but when is the latest people could order chicken soup for the new year?
You could order it at
Whenever.
6 o'clock on Friday night if you needed to.
Yep.
So we're open every day, but the package will be around starting Tuesday.
Starting Tuesday
so-
through the weekend. So whenever you guys need it, we're open from 10 a.m. until 9 p.m. daily. So whatever you need.
Fantastic.
I had trouble with the chow now. I couldn't get my email to work.
Oh no, I don't know who's talking.
Is it?
Well, whoever said that I can't, but, you can just send us an email, call,
Do that.
and we can always just set it up.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.
And we'll type it into, we'll type our contact information into the chat. We just talk to our
And then we are available at Whole Foods. So any of the local Whole Foods in the whole DMV area, we're in all of the Mid-Atlantic. So, find us at any point. We have lots of all soup stock there, as well as our spicy soup. So check us out for sure.
Thank you, guys. You're
Thank you
super
very
kind.
much.
We had it for Shabbat dinner.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Glad you're with us.
Beth, I think gents I don't know about, maybe more. Sorry, with my mouth full. I think maybe more egg would be a little bit denser, a little bit more of like the fat. So maybe do a couple more eggs or egg yolks. Underdone, just don't cook it as long. So
Yeah.
take out when it's still developing a little bit, and then you'll be good.
Got it.
Rabbi's going to give me a tutorial. Thank you.
All right, my dinner crew's coming in and asking what's next.
We would share this if we could, but we're gonna bake our stuff one, and it's gonna be delicious. Yeah.
Right.
Bye.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Awesome. We'll be on for a few more minutes if anybody has any other questions. Other than that, thank you guys so much. How long will dough last before you freeze? You want to get it frozen because if you don't, it's going to continue to freeze. So put that dough in the freezer so it goes to sleep, so it doesn't overproof. So if you braided it, get it right in the freezer. Yeah.
be, you know, how much of each.
What is the proportion of ingredients for cinnamon and sugar filled? Yeah, I mean, I think I would probably go with, you know, a tablespoon of sugar and a teaspoon of cinnamon. Cinnamon's going to be, or, you know, the mixture that you can already get. So again, I think it really depends how much you want to put in, but I think a tablespoon or two of the total sugar mixture would be the way to go. Yeah, I mean, we didn't talk about this, but you could also roll the strands in the cinnamon sugar and then bake them, and then it's almost like a babka, and that would be insanely good too. So, all right, guys, we are going to sign off, but thank you so much.
I just wanted to make sure we got all the last questions.
Are we good on that?
We're good. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Have a wonderful time. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.